Graham's eyes flickered once again to the glowing screen of his phone. No new messages. The pale light washed across his face as he pressed his lips into a thin line, then turned his wrist to check the time on his watch. 17 minutes past the hour. His jaw tightened. He hated lateness, not because of the inconvenience, but because of what it made him remember. It took him back to another time, another version of himself. A small boy sitting on a doorstep that stayed closed, waiting for someone who never came. That hollow, helpless feeling never really left him. Being forgotten once had turned into a quiet, lifelong habit of never letting anyone close enough to forget him again. He pushed his chair back. The legs slid smoothly across the marble floor, the faint sound catching the maitre d's attention. The man started toward him, but Graham lifted a hand slightly, signaling, "Not now." And then, it happened. A small blur moved quickly between the legs of a waiter and a passing couple. A flash of blonde curls, pink shoes, and tiny determined steps. A little girl ran straight toward him, uninvited, unafraid. She clutched at his pant leg with small, warm fingers and looked up, cheeks flushed from running, blue eyes wide with urgency. "My mommy's sorry she's late," the little girl said, a little breathless, as though she had practiced those words 100 times, as though delivering them was a sacred task. For the first time in a very long while, Graham froze. The restaurant blurred around him, the quiet music, the silver cutlery, the low hum of conversation, all of it fading into the background. The perfect rhythm of his ordered life came to a pause. He looked down at the little girl. She was maybe 3, a wisp of a child in a denim jumper over a yellow t-shirt. One sock had slipped down to her ankle. The other stayed neatly in place. A tiny silver barrette held one lock of hair to the side while the rest formed a halo of soft curls. And those eyes, open, honest, expectant. His lips parted, but no words came. The girl waited, frowning a little, then repeated with firmer conviction, "Mommy said she's really sorry." She tugged again at his pant leg and pointed to the empty chair across from him. "That's for her, right?" Graham slowly lowered himself back into his seat, eyes still on the little messenger before him. Something inside him shifted, something old, buried, quietly wounded. He had been that waiting child once, inventing stories to explain why someone hadn't come. He had built walls, built companies, built a whole identity to protect himself from that ache. And now here stood this tiny girl, unknowingly handing him the words he had needed decades ago. "Sorry I'm late," a voice called out from behind, breathless and warm. "Maisie." "Maisie, honey." A woman hurried into view, slightly bent from the rush, her heels clicking unevenly across the polished floor. "I told you to wait by the door," she said softly, but her tone carried more relief than anger. Graham looked up. The woman, blonde hair escaping a low bun, cheeks flushed, wearing a simple navy dress, met his eyes. She hesitated for half a heartbeat, then offered a quick, apologetic smile. "I'm so sorry," she said, breath catching. She insisted on finding you." Maisie beamed proudly. "I did it, Mommy," I told him. The woman gave a small laugh, embarrassed and tender all at once. "Yes, you did." Then, turning back to Graham, she extended a hand. Laya Monroe." He shook it instinctively. Her grip was firm, honest, without the polished pretense he was used to. "Graham Hale," he said. Something flickered across her face at the name, recognition maybe, but she didn't mention it. Instead, she crouched to her daughter's level. "Maisie, can you say sorry for running off?" "Sorry, Mr. Graham," Maisie said solemnly. He blinked, almost startled by how gently the moment had unfolded. "It's okay," he murmured. The maitre d' reappeared, uncertain whether to step in or retreat. Graham lifted a hand slightly. They were staying. Laya guided Maisie into the chair beside her, smoothing her curls and helping her settle. Every movement was calm, filled with a kind of practiced care. She adjusted her own chair with a small sigh of apology, and finally allowed herself one deep exhale. For the first time in years, Graham didn't mind the time. Laya Monroe sat across from him, strands of golden hair slipping loose around her face. The sleeves of her dress were a little creased. Her cheeks still carried a soft flush from rushing. "I'm sorry," she said again, quieter now. "There was a man near the subway. He collapsed. I couldn't just leave him." Her voice carried no drama, no attempt to justify, only quiet truth. Graham looked at her. He had expected something ordinary: traffic, lost keys, a call that ran late. Not this. His mind, so used to neat categories, faltered. She reached down to fix Maisie's sandal, her hand resting there a moment longer than needed, then straightened up again. She wore no jewelry, not even a watch, but her posture, her gaze, steady, grounded, gave her a presence stronger than anyone he had met in months. "Most people don't stop," he said softly. "Most people assume someone else will," she replied, simply. He studied her face for a moment, unsure which surprised him more, that she had stopped for a stranger or that she spoke about it like it was the most natural thing in the world. "It took longer than I thought," she added. The ambulance was late, and Maisie insisted we still come. Graham found himself saying without thinking, "I'm glad you did." Maisie giggled and waved at a passing waiter. "Mommy makes boo-boos feel better." Laya smiled at her daughter, then met Graham's eyes again. "I hope you weren't waiting too long." 17 minutes, he said before he could stop himself. Her smile faltered slightly. "That's pretty long." He hesitated, then surprised even himself. "It's fine." Something about the way she said sorry, not defensive, not dramatic, just genuine, disarmed him. He was used to efficiency, to people who managed time like money, but this woman had traded punctuality for compassion. Somehow that unsettled him more than lateness ever had. "You said he collapsed?" he asked quietly. Laya nodded. "He just fell." People kept walking around him. "I didn't know what happened, but I couldn't leave him there." Maisie held my bag while someone called 911. Graham studied her. Her voice was calm but not detached. She had warmth in her tone, a quiet steadiness that felt like sunlight after too much shadow. He was used to sharpness, to polished voices that hid intention behind courtesy, but there was nothing hidden here. Maisie fidgeted with a sugar packet, and Laya gently took it from her hand. "Sorry," she said again. "We're not usually this chaotic." Graham gave a rare, small smile. "It's okay." Something in her posture relaxed. The tension in her shoulders softened. For once, she didn't seem like she had to prove anything. "Thank you for still coming," Graham added. His tone was quieter now, almost tentative. Laya tilted her head, curiosity glimmering in her eyes. "Did you think I wouldn't?" He gave a faint shrug. "I thought you might decide it wasn't worth it." "If I didn't think it was worth it," she said softly, "I wouldn't be here." The words hung between them, simple and sincere. Something moved in Graham's chest. Something unfamiliar, uncomfortable, almost fragile. Admiration, maybe, or the faint stirring of trust. He looked down at his watch again, but this time not to check the time. "You carry a lot," he said quietly. Laya smiled faintly. "Don't we all?" The waiter returned with a high chair, and Maisie climbed into it with absolute confidence, legs swinging, grinning as though she owned the place. She grabbed the corner of the menu, squinting at the letters she couldn't read. "Is grilled cheese okay?" Graham asked. Before Laya could answer, Maisie piped up, "I love grilled everything." Laya laughed softly, a sound that made Graham's chest loosen. "She's not exaggerating," she said. "If it has cheese and grill marks, we're in." Graham nodded at the waiter. "3 orders then. 1 grilled cheese, 1 seared salmon, and 1 pasta. No herbs, no green things," he added, glancing at Maisie. The little girl gave an approving thumbs up.
The waiter left, and for a few quiet moments the three of them simply existed together in the soft hum of the restaurant. The background music floated through the air, the notes slow and delicate. Candles flickered on each table, their flames bending slightly each time someone walked past. Graham found himself watching the reflections of those tiny flames in Maisie's wide eyes. She was busy arranging the cutlery like it was a puzzle, lining each forked tooth carefully against the edge of the napkin. Leia smiled at her daughter's focus. "She does this everywhere we go," she said, leaning a little closer. "If she's not coloring, she's rearranging things." "An early organizer," Graham said, amused. "Or a future interior designer," Leia replied, a faint laugh slipping through. He liked that sound. It wasn't loud or polished, it was light, like something real people made when they weren't trying to impress anyone. They began to talk again, gently at first. The conversation moved like a careful waltz, slow, testing steps, Pauses. Smiles. She told him about the bookstore where she worked. It was tucked between a laundromat and a cafe, she said. The kind of place that always smelled like dust, ink, and the faint sweetness of old paper. Most days, it's quiet, she added. Just me and a few regulars who come to read without buying anything. Graham listened. And you don't mind? Leia shook her head. Not really. There's something comforting about people who just want to be near stories. He watched her as she spoke, noting the way she gestured when she described a book or a memory. Her hands moved with an easy rhythm, not calculated, not self-conscious. He couldn't remember the last time someone spoke to him without trying to measure their words. And you? She asked, tilting her head. What kind of work do you do? He hesitated. Technology, he said finally. Software. Systems. I build things that help people organize, automate, improve efficiency. Leia smiled slightly. That sounds important. It's practical, he replied. He didn't usually have to explain his work. People knew who he was, what he had built, but she didn't lean forward with interest for his money or name. She just listened, curious, kind. That simple attention felt more valuable than the admiration he usually received. Then, mid-sentence it happened. Maisie reached for her glass of juice, her little fingers overshooting their target. The glass tipped, cold water splashing across the table, running straight onto Leia's lap. She gasped softly and pushed back her chair, half laughing, half apologizing. Oh no, I'm so sorry. She grabbed at a napkin, fumbling. But Graham was already moving. Without a word, he reached into his jacket pocket and pulled out a perfectly folded handkerchief, white, pressed, precise. He leaned forward slightly and began gently dabbing the fabric of her dress, just above the knee. His movements were careful, steady, almost reverent. Leia stilled. For a heartbeat, the room felt suspended. His hand paused mid-motion, her breath caught. She looked at him, really looked, and something subtle changed between them. The space seemed smaller now, warmer, quieter. You're not what I expected, she said softly, eyes locked with his. He glanced up, folding the cloth slowly in his hands. Neither are you. She smiled, though her voice trembled slightly with emotion. Most men don't carry handkerchiefs anymore. I'm not most men, he said simply. She laughed then, brushing her damp skirt. That much is very clear. Maisie, blissfully unaware of the shift between them, munched on a breadstick and hummed to herself. The moment eased back into gentle calm. Thank you, Leia said quietly. That was unexpectedly kind. It was nothing, he replied, though they both knew it wasn't. It was a small act, but it had what a simple gesture that carried a tenderness neither of them had anticipated. For the rest of the meal, their conversation flowed more naturally. They spoke of little things, the smell of rain, the way city lights looked through bus windows, the strange comfort of routines. Graham found himself laughing laughing when Maisie proudly declared that she wanted to be a cloud doctor when she grew up, someone who could fix sad clouds so they wouldn't cry too much. When dessert came up, small chocolate tart split between them, MEC clapped her hands in delight. Leia helped her cut a piece, then caught Graham watching her. What? She asked, smiling. Nothing, he said. It's just, ... You're very patient. She tests it daily, Leia replied with mock seriousness. But she's worth every second. Maisie looked up, mouth full of chocolate. Mommy, he likes you. Leia froze, cheeks coloring, while Graham coughed into his napkin. Maisie, she said softly, half scolding, half laughing. The little girl giggled, delighted by her own mischief. I can tell, she whispered loudly, as if sharing a secret. Graham met Leia's eyes, and for a second, they both just smiled, helpless against the absurd sweetness of it all. Time slipped by, faster than either expected. The crowd in the restaurant began to thin, and the soft clatter of plates turned into quiet background noise. Graham didn't realize how late it had grown until the waiter approached with the check. Outside, the night air had cooled. The city had softened into a hum of distant cars and streetlights reflected on damp pavement. Graham held the door open as Leia stepped out, balancing Maisie on her hip. "I'll drive you home," he said, glancing toward the sleek black car waiting across the street. "It's late. The city's not exactly safe this time of night." Leia smiled politely, shaking her head. "Thank you, but we take the bus." He blinked, surprised. "The bus. Maisie loves it," she said. "It's her favorite part of the evening. She waves at everyone through the window." Maisie perked up instantly. "And Mommy lets me sit by the window if nobody else needs it," she announced proudly. Graham hesitated. He wasn't used to people turning down convenience. Most accepted his offers before he finished speaking. But Leia's refusal wasn't prideful or distant, it was simple, grounded. Their way was enough for them. They walked together toward the bus stop. Graham adjusted his stride to match theirs. The sidewalk was uneven, cracked in places, and Maisie pointed excitedly at a small flower growing from one of the gaps. "Look, Mommy, it's brave," she said. Leia crouched beside her, touching the tiny bloom gently. "Yes, it is," she whispered. Graham watched the scene quietly. Something in his chest tightened, a blend of admiration and something deeper he didn't have a word for. "Do you live far?" he asked. "Not really," Leia replied. 15 minutes by bus." He nodded. "That's not bad." "Maisie usually falls asleep halfway," she said, smiling at her daughter, who was now skipping ahead a few steps, singing to herself. They reached the bus stop. The bench was old, the metal worn smooth from years of use. A faint smell of rain lingered in the air. The sign above them flickered once before settling into a steady glow. For a few moments, they stood in comfortable silence. Leia shifted her bag from one shoulder to the other, glancing at Graham. "You don't usually do this, do you?" she asked. He raised an eyebrow. "Do what?" "Wait for a bus with strangers." He laughed softly. "No, I can't say I do." She smiled. "Then tonight's full of firsts." The bus came into view, its headlights sweeping across the wet road. Maisie squealed with excitement, waving as it slowed to a stop. The driver, an older man with kind eyes, nodded at them. Leia lifted Maisie onto the first step, then turned back to Graham. "Thank you for dinner, and for being patient." He nodded. "Thank you for not leaving me waiting too long." She smiled at that, her eyes bright with something gentle. "Good night, Graham." He hesitated, then said softly, "Good night, Leia." "Good night, Maisie." The little girl waved as the doors closed. "Bye, Mr. Graham." The bus pulled away, and he stood there watching until it disappeared down the street, the red taillights glowing faintly in the distance. The sound of the engine faded, leaving only the quiet whisper of the city around him. For a long moment, Graham didn't move. He stood there, hands in his pockets, staring down the empty road. Then, without fully understanding why, he smiled. It wasn't a polished smile, the kind he used in photographs or meetings. It was real, small, private, almost shy. When he finally walked toward his car, the night didn't feel as cold. He didn't check his watch this time, and for the first time in years, he didn't feel like the boy waiting on a doorstep for someone who never came. He felt like a man who had finally been found by a woman with soft eyes, a child with pink shoes, and a moment he hadn't expected but somehow needed all along.